You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Halloween special episode of Perfect 10. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and as I said, this is a special episode. This is a little different from the other episodes that we've put out. I do not have a guest for this one. It's just me. But here's the thing. You guys are the guests. You guys are the special guests on this episode, because what I did was I put it out there and I said, hey, hit me up with your Perfect 10 Halloween movies, and I got a few responses, and I more than enough to put together an episode here, and I'll obviously talk about my own Perfect 10 Halloween films, and we'll just have a little conversation, and I'm hoping that that we can do more of these in the future. What I would really like. So here, I've been thinking about this a lot. I said on the last episode, that if we can get the Patreon up to $250 a month, that I will start doing a Perfect 10 every other week, as opposed to every 4 weeks right now. So basically double the number of Perfect 10 episodes. Let's focus on that right now, and then eventually let's get to the point, where we've smashed that goal, and then we can start talking about Perfect 10 being a weekly podcast. But until we get that 250, we're just going to focus on that, on going to the bi-weekly schedule. But if we can do that, my hope is that basically I will do a guest episode, what we've been doing as regular Perfect 10 episodes, every 4 weeks, basically the same cadence, right? But then in between those, so on those other weeks, if I'm not able to schedule a guest, because sometimes it's difficult, then I can do like a special episode like this, where we do you guys, the listeners, write in and let me know. There will be a topic: Halloween movies, Christmas movies, that sort of thing. I think around the July period, we definitely have like vacation movies and like summer blockbusters and that sort of thing. And then the other idea that I had was a Perfect 10 ranked lists. So doing episodes where myself and a guest go through a franchise or a genre or just sort of whatever sort of categorization we decide to put together. Maybe it's 80s movies, maybe it's Star Wars movies, what have you, but we take those films or TV shows, or maybe it would be like top 10, like the Perfect 10 Buffy episodes, right? And go through and pull out 10 episodes that myself and that guest think are the best episodes of that series, right? Or like I said, we go through the Star Wars films and we rank the 10 best Star Wars movies. So if we can get to that point, then hopefully we'll be able to start doing some of that stuff. And again, just continuing to talk with cool people about the things that they love, and just sort of spread that joy on the internet. That's the goal here. So hopefully you like that. Hopefully you guys like this episode. And hopefully this gives you an idea for the next one, sort of I think the reason why I didn't get as much response as I was hoping for, is on the Discord. It was funny, like I kind of put out a thing a few weeks back going like, hey, send your stuff in. And then a bunch of people were like, yeah, I don't really have like a favorite Halloween movie. So it might have been, I think, the topic on this one. So I think that when we do the Christmas movies, it'll probably go a little bit better. I think if I were to say like, what are your perfect 10 DC films, that would probably be one that would be pretty easy to populate with some emails. But nonetheless, we did get a handful here. Before we get into that, I'm going to give two. So I have two perfect 10 Halloween movies that I like to try and watch every year if I can. And then I'll have an honorable mention at the end as well, which isn't technically a Halloween movie. It's not technically a Christmas movie. It fits somewhere in the middle. You guys can probably guess what that is, and I'll talk about that. So, I first and foremost, growing up, this is the one that I talked about already, sort of to preface this episode. Every year when it was on TV, my brother Chris and I would watch Ernest Scared Stupid. We would also just rent it from the video store, which were these places that you could go and you could get small plastic rectangles that you would put into a machine attached to your TV that would then play the videos. And we would rent Ernest Scared Stupid every year around Halloween. Which, like, it's now come to think of it, like, unless they had multiple copies, that meant that, like, in our neighborhood, there were maybe like 3 video stores in our neighborhood. So there was like 3 opportunities for kids to have rented Ernest Scared Stupid, and somehow we always managed to have it. It's almost like nobody else cared. But Ernest Scared Stupid, for those who don't know, the Ernest films, starring Jim Varney, who you might also know as the voice of Slinky Dog in Toy Story, among other characters that he's played throughout film and television. Famous star of stage and screen. I don't know if he was ever a stage star, but Jim Varney. Originally, I guess, known for something called Hey Vern. That was, I think, a little bit before my time, or possibly more of an American thing. I think I don't think that it was on any of our stations up here. I think maybe it was like because if it was like a Nickelodeon thing or something like that, then back in the day we didn't have those channels. But I knew him as Ernest, which was one of his characters that he did. I think Hey Vern was like a sketch show sort of thing. And Ernest was one of his characters. So and they made a bunch of these Ernest movies. And it would be like, let's see, like Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Saves Christmas. There's a whole he's kind of his own genre. MCU before the MCU existed. And Ernest Scared Stupid is probably the one for me that stands out the most. It's certainly the one that we watch the most. And so it holds a very special place in my heart. But look, listen, I fully recognize that Ernest Scared Stupid it's not a masterpiece of film. It is far from a masterpiece. But it worked for me as a kid. It was scary. It was funny. I enjoyed it. The plot is essentially that I think it's like because you got to remember it's the early 90s, right? So environmentalism is a big draw in storytelling, and I think what they're doing is like they're building something, and like they're gonna build a new shopping mall or something. It's been so long since I've watched this movie, but I in the process of whatever they're gonna build, an apartment or shopping mall or whatever it is, parking lot maybe, they bulldoze a tree Ernest hasn't even shown up at this point, I don't think. But a tree gets bulldozed, and when this tree gets bulldozed, we discover that it was actually basically like put there over top of like a troll, like a legit like a troll, a scary monster troll, that was like imprisoned with magic underneath this tree. So when this tree gets knocked down, I think this is how it happens. Then the troll is released, and it just so happens to be Halloween. We catch up with Ernest, who I think maybe he like either works in or lives in a junkyard in this one. I can't remember. But there's some kids. His house is like full of ridiculous contraptions and nonsense and that sort of thing. These kids that he's friends with, because no self-respecting adult would be friends with Ernest. So he hangs out with children, in a completely innocent and PG way. I don't give me any of that nonsense with Ernest. This is pure. This is wholesome content, guys. So he's got a couple of like sort of tween teenage friends who have, they got their problems. They got their 90s white kid teenage problems, and he helps them out with these things. And so there's all sorts of subplots in this story. But basically, this troll gets out, and kids start going missing because they get like, the troll turns them into little wooden dolls, and it's up to Ernest and his two friends to I think they're like a brother and sister. I'm not 100% sure, but it's up to Ernest and these two kids, because nobody else believes them. Nobody believes them that there's a troll on the loose, and that's why all these kids are going missing. So it's up to Ernest and these kids to figure out how to stop this troll once and for all, and save their little idyllic small American small town. And obviously they do. Everybody saves the day. They win. But I mean, like, it gets pretty rough for a second, because like one of the kids gets turned into a wooden doll. But one of my favorite jokes of all time is in this film, and that's one of the reasons why I even wanted to do this episode. They're trying to figure out how to defeat this monster. And as you do, you go to the library and you research the monster to try and find its weakness. And this specific troll just so happens to have one weakness. And they look in the book, and I can't remember why, but for some reason they can't quite read it. There's a letter missing. It's like, here's its one weakness. The troll's weakness is, and they can make out the letters M, I, blank, and then K. So its one weakness is M, I, blank, K. And I'm spoiling the movie. I'm sorry if you haven't seen it. Ernest and the kids go off. They gotta find this weakness, and the kids obviously figure it out because it's not that hard. And I wonder how much the dairy producers of America paid Ernest to make this the plot of his film. But they go off to get what is the actual one weakness of the troll. And Ernest goes off to get what he thinks is the weakness of the troll. And there's a confrontation. I think it's like at the Halloween dance at the school in the gymnasium or whatever. And or maybe it's just like the spooktacular event that's happening on Halloween and everybody's there. The troll crashes the party, starts turning kids into wooden dolls left and right. And then Ernest shows up in the nick of time with the solution to this problem. And he's like so good because he's just like he has this whole like speech that he makes to the troll where he's like, I bet you didn't think that I could do it, and I'll tell you it was difficult this time of year in this small town, but I did manage to find. And he produces a jar of miak, Miak, which is like some Eastern European something or other. And that joke just like it has stuck with me my entire life because it's so awful. It's such a bad joke, but it's not the quality of the joke, it's the quality of the earnest that sells it, which is that this guy is just such a doofus, such an utter doofus. So every time I watch the movie, I begrudgingly laugh at it. And then as an adult, anytime the actual one weakness of the troll, milk, comes up, especially somebody mispronouncing milk, like when somebody says milk, which Crystal does. So I think about it a lot. She'll say milk. My brain automatically goes to miak, and I just keep it to myself, because you had to be there. You had to be one of the kids who watched Ernest Scared Stupid every Halloween for like 5 years in a row, in order for that to be even remotely humorous, much less like actually funny to you. So that's my Ernest Scared Stupid story. And with that, I'm gonna read one of the emails. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna open it up with frequent email writer back in the day of Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, Sarah Beth Stout, and Sarah Beth says, is it too late to add in Halloween Town and Ernest Scared Stupid for the Halloween Perfect 10? Hope not. No, it wasn't, because this was like a week ago. You had so much time to do it. Yeah. I know at least one listener knows what I'm talking about and will understand the Miak joke, and know that I absolutely butchered it, right? Like, it's not funny the way that I presented it. It's not funny the way that it's done in the movie. So I don't feel like I really did anything wrong. I think that we're still net zero. We're still at neutral. So, but at least there's one other person who will understand where I'm coming from on that one. Halloween Town is not something that I have a lot of familiarity with. And the reason why is that Halloween Town was like a Disney Channel thing, right? And we didn't have Disney Channel in Canada until the late 90s. Now, like, you could get it if you had like satellite, or I think maybe if you had like a cable box, like the expensive cable box, like the one for like HBO, because like it wasn't like today where everybody's got a box attached to their TV, right? Back then, in the mid 90s, because I think Halloween Town started in maybe the mid to late 90s. Maybe it's probably later 90s. It was more like newer TVs would have the channels, like the ability to change channels built in. But like when I was a kid, so we're talking about like younger than 10. So early to mid 90s. I had a little black and white TV in my bedroom. Very old TV from probably like the 70s. Just like a real bubble of a CRT tube TV, right? Not even CRT, I think, just a tube TV. Maybe CRT, maybe the TN CRT stands for tube. I don't know. But anyways, like just these like real like retro, bubbly 60s/70s TVs. And in order to get channels on it, you needed a converter box. So, and like the TV that I had, it did have channels. It had 12 channels. But those channels were like, you couldn't really, you hooked it up. This is how old I am, man. You hooked it up. It had like two basically screws on the back, and you would have these like two prongs that you would plug in, and they were actually for the antenna, right? Like to do the antenna, and then you would, like, the channel changer was to tune the antenna to different channels, and then you would try and find the signal, and then move the antennas around, right? So even I am too young to really have lived through that part of time, but antenna broadcast was still, it was still readily available. Back when I was a kid, really up until I think about like 15 years ago, it was pretty standard that you could get antenna TV. I don't know if you still can today. Surprisingly, most flat screen TVs actually do have antennas built into them. So I guess I could go find out. But what you would get is you'd get a converter box, and the converter box would have a coax, which is like the cable cord, right? That you like, it's like the thick cable, and then it's got like the little, just like a little metal wire sticking out of it, and then you like stick that in and screw it on, right? So that's a coax, right? So you would put the coaxial cable into the converter box, and then the converter box would have an out that would go to the antenna attachments, those two prongs that are the two screws that you'd have, like these prongs. They're like little like U-shaped prongs that you would fit onto the screw, tighten the screw, and that's where the signal would come through. And obviously, like, the TV that I had attached to this didn't have, it didn't even have a controller. You needed a separate controller to do it. So you needed the clicker, right? And they clicked. They literally clicked back then. And so that was like how you just got basic channels, like the 13 or 20 some odd basic channels that you had with your cable package in the 90s. And then if you were really fancy, bringing it all back to the Disney Channel stuff, if you were really fancy, if you were a rich person, your family had one of the special boxes that also accessed like HBO, and in Canada we have a thing called Super Channel. I don't think that they have that in the States. And then I think maybe Family Channel was on that at the time, and it wasn't really until like the late 90s, I think around like 98, maybe 97, 98, whenever Teletoon and all, which I've talked about on ThunderQuack back in the day, whenever that happened, that those, so Teletoon and the Space Channel, all of a sudden the TV channels went from there being like, I think there were 30, basically, like at 30, which, like, for me in Penticton, when they topped out at 30, like those last few channels were like Discovery, the Learning Channel, and this is back when Discovery and Learning Channel were actually about like science and nature and learning, history, and that sort of thing. Now they're just reality TV channels, and they call that documentary. But it sort of capped out with those, and then I think like news. I think like one of the 24-hour news channels or whatever. And then all of a sudden it went to like, oh, there's like 100 channels, and Family Channel was one of them, which Family Channel in Canada had all of the broadcast rights to, not all, because it was actually very frustrating at times. they had the broadcast rights to some of the Disney Channel stuff. So I'd be getting my Disney Adventures magazine, and I'd be looking at Disney Adventures, and I'd be going like, that looks really cool, but it's on Disney Channel, so I don't get to watch it. And then Family Channel was finally accessible, I just for anybody with cable, and and some stuff was then available, right? So like Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, I can remember being a really big deal when that came on, and that was going to be on Family Channel. I remember like the movie premiered and all that sort of thing. And so eventually, sort of after the fact, I would become aware of Halloween Town, but I think that they were like 3 movies in, and I didn't care about this franchise, and I think I was a little bit too old. So I missed out on Halloween Town, but I know that similar to my feelings on Ernest Scared Stupid, there's a lot of people who care about Halloween Town, and it's a big part of their yearly Halloween traditions, and I totally respect that. It's just never really been one of mine. Let's jump into another email, and then I'll talk about another one of my perfect 10s. But actually, this one didn't come in email because Tyler couldn't be bothered to email me, so he just messaged me on Facebook Messenger. He broke the rules. But this one comes from Tyler James Nickel. You guys might remember from our second episode talking about Transformers, the movie, the soundtrack. And he gave me a list of 13, spooky, 13 of his favorite Halloween movies. And let me run through this list. And then he calls out one in particular. So The Invisible Man Returns from 1940. Arsenic and Old Lace from 1944. House on Haunted Hill from 1959. So we're talking the OG House on Haunted Hill. The Monster Club from 1981. Creepshow 1982, a classic. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch from 1982. Now, this is the thing about Tyler, is that that's one of the, like, I don't know the Halloween movies that well because I don't really, it's not my jam, but I believe that Halloween 3, Season of the Witch is the one that everybody sort of is like, this is the one where it starts going too far. Little Shop of Horrors, I will second that one. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors is in and of itself a perfect 10. Scream, again, another perfect 10. 13 Ghosts, maybe not quite. Slither, I've never watched, but I believe Slither is the James Gunn movie, so I think Slither is James Gunn. Let me double check that now that I've said it. I believe that he directed it. Michael Rooker's in it, so yes. I almost certainly, yeah, written and directed by James Gunn. So that is very obvious why that's on the list. Trick or Treat, which is an anthology horror movie from 2007. I stopped giving the years, didn't I? Scream was 1996, 13 Ghosts 2001, Slither 2006, Trick or Treat 2007, Doctor Sleep 2019. Man, Doctor Sleep, such a good movie. Mike Flanagan. I just talked about that on Off the Record. I just dropped Doctor Sleep and Mike Flanagan stuff. Which House on Haunted Hill, sorry, not House on Haunted Hill. Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Doctor Sleep, The Midnight Club, his newest one that's on Netflix. All fantastic stuff. What's his other movie? It's like on the tip of my tongue. The plot is that this woman who's deaf, is this person is like trying to break into her. She like lives in a remote little house. Actually, not a little house, big house, nice house. But she's by herself in this house, and this guy is like stalking her. Man, what's it called? It's one of Mike Flanagan's first films. Fantastic, really good horror film. And then Malignant in 2021. So that's Tyler's list. A great list. but he singles out. I was like, give me one of those and tell me, like, give me a little bit more why. And so he singled out Scream from 1996. It's a horror movie about horror movies, infinitely quotable, like it was a sing along. Has a party in it with party vibes. Franchise launcher, so if you want, you can pick one of the five. And the killer is a easy, cheap costume. All great reasons for it being a perfect 10. I mean, like, I'll also jump on this one and say that for Scream, which, like, I'm not going to go too deep into this. And you know why? Because Scream is a movie that deserves a perfect 10 episode all on its own. And I'm sure that one day we will get to that. But I'll just say, like, the cast, I think, is one of the main reasons why Scream stands the test of time. And the funny thing is that, like, the core three that continue throughout the other Scream films, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette, I actually think are the three weakest in the first movie. Because I think that let me run through this. I'm gonna bring it up on IMDb. You can hear my clicky clacks going. IMDb wants me to watch the Quantumania trailer. I want to watch the Quantumania trailer again as well. But here we go. Scream 1996. So obviously we start the movie with Drew Barrymore, with the cameo from Drew Barrymore, right? Which is fantastic. But Skeet Ulrich, fantastic. Rose McGowan, so 90s. Matthew Lillard, how can you make a movie in the 90s without Matthew Lillard? Jamie Kennedy, in possibly the only role that Jamie Kennedy was right for ever. Yeah, man, like just a fantastic cast. That's the top cast. But who else we got in this one? Who else we got that's important in this one? Was there anybody else? Liev Schreiber, right? Sabretooth himself. From the really bad Wolverine movie. Yeah, man. I just great actors. Henry Winkler shows up in it as the principal. Yeah. I love this movie. It's such a good movie. Such a great cast, with some real, like, standout characters. Awesome. Let me get into my second Halloween Perfect 10, and that is a movie that I have talked about on multiple occasions across the history of ThunderQuack and Quiver and all of that. Because I talk about it, I think, almost every Halloween. Because it's always like, I don't think that Amanda's ever seen it. And so I would tell her constantly to watch it. And that is American Werewolf in London, the original one. I don't mind an American Werewolf in Paris. I think that it's fine. It kind of misses the point of the original film. But it's a fun adventure movie. It's not a horror movie. But an American Werewolf in London is a straight up romantic comedy, actually. It is a straight up romantic comedy that just so happens to feature the romantic male lead in the midst of discovering that he has become a werewolf. While backpacking through Europe with his best friend, the lead character is they're warned by so they're I think they're in Scotland, and they go into this little pub one night. I'm trying to find the character's name. So David and Jack go into this little pub, and everybody there is kind of like freaking out that these two outsiders are in this pub, and there's all this weird, like, occult stuff, like pentagrams and stuff like that all over the place in this pub, and So Jack and David are like, you know what, we're gonna go, and as like when they're leaving, they're like the creepy denizens of this little the Scottish pub are like, stay off the moors. You gotta stay off the moors because it's a full moon, so stay off the moors. And you're like, ooh, stay off the moors. And eventually, of course, Jack and David end up on the moors, and they are beset upon by a bear. In the original cut of the movie, it's like a single frame of what appears to be like a bear, kind of, but it's a werewolf. It's meant to be a werewolf. And Jack is killed, but David wakes up in a hospital in London. And two things happen in this hospital in London. The first is that he is visited by the ghost of his best friend, Jack, who informs him that he is, in fact, becoming a werewolf, and that he'll transform under the light of the first full moon, or the next full moon, I should say. And David thinks that he's going crazy, right? He's also having these really, really vivid nightmares of like demon Nazis killing his family and stuff. It's at Christmas. Like it's intense. There's some like weird, intense stuff that happens in the first act of this film. But the other thing that's happening alongside of all of this weird, intense horror stuff, one of the greatest things is that, like, Jack, as he appears to David over the course of the film, because he's tied to the werewolf curse. He's doomed. His spirit is doomed to walk the earth forever until the line of werewolves is ended, and the werewolf that attacked Jack and David is killed. So David is the end of the line of these werewolves. So he's got to kill himself, is what Jack keeps telling him. So you got to kill yourself so that me and the other victims of this werewolf and every other werewolf that down the line, because they're all doomed to walk the earth forever. And the great thing about it is that, like, every time Jack shows up, he more and more decomposed as the movie goes on. It's a great, like, it's a gag, but it's a gag with like a horror. This is where horror works the best, is when it's also got a sense of humor to it, but it's still creepy and unsettling and all that. But the other thing that's happening while all of this horror stuff is happening to David is that he meets Nurse Alex Price, and falls head over heels because she is beautiful and she's got that accent, and it just all works. And so we get what is it? Is it Florence Nightingale? The analogy. He falls in love with his nurse, and she kind of falls in love with him. And when he's allowed to leave the hospital, she invites him to stay with her, and it gets spicy. And then she goes to work the next day, and it just so happens that evening is the first full moon since he was attacked, and it's been a month basically. And then we are treated to what is, and probably will forever be, the greatest werewolf transformation sequence ever put to film. It's extended. It's lengthy, and it's painful to watch, but you can't look away because it's so good. It's the best. It's the best transformation sequence ever in like werewolf transformation sequence ever in any movie, and everything else is just trying to live up to it, and failing spectacularly, because how could you can't and I mean, like, this was Rick Baker at the top of his game. I don't remember which he did first, if he did this first or if he did. I think he did this, and then Michael Jackson saw this movie and was like, "Hey, I come do my Thriller music video, because it's very similar." It's so this is the key to it. This is the technology, and this is the behind the scenes that I'll give you. This is the tech that Rick Baker came up with in order to achieve the transformation effects. Is that they created prosthetics with basically like balloons, inflatable balloon bellows inside them, so that they could put these prosthetics on the actor and then inflate them. And when they inflate them, then like, so the nose, right, the snout of the werewolf would then like extend out. And I so you would have David, the actor, I just had it a second ago, David Naughton, who played David Kessler in the film, giving a performance, and giving an amazing performance, because he's sort of just, it's so great, because he starts and he's just like, oh, I'm just so hot, I'm hot, like my like you like it's his metabolism changing, right, as he transforms into a wolf. And and so he gets naked, and which is perfect, because he's about to transform into a big evil monster dog. And it just like, it goes through like his bones cracking as they change into a new shape, and his body transforms and morphs into this other creature. And then you get like these prosthetics on his face that are just like going right, and it's so believable, it's so fantastic. It just, yeah, it is, in my opinion, it's the best that's ever been done. And then the movie continues on from there. I don't want to spoil it, because I think that everybody should watch this movie if you haven't watched it, and that was the perfect time. Like, this time of year is the absolute perfect time to watch it. And I try and watch it almost every year at Halloween. I don't know if I'll get around to it, because it's less than a week away. It's also just a great romantic comedy with these two characters, but then he happens to be turning into a monster every so often. I mean, it's 3 nights of it that he transforms. The 3 nights of the full moon sort of thing. And in the process, he manages to kill a few people whose ghosts then haunt him. And it just kind of goes from there. So watch it. Go watch An American Werewolf in London. I think here's the thing. It's horror that I think is accessible for everybody, because it's not actually that scary, and there's not really that many jump scares. And in fact, like, we are sympathetic to the monster, because the monster is this charming young American kid who just wanted to go on a trip with his best friend, before, going off to college or whatever life moment they're in. I will say that I think there's some controversy around the film because of John Landis, and I think that John Landis is not strictly speaking a great role model, let's say. I think, like, so the biggest thing. Let's see. It's the Twilight Zone stuff. That's right. So in filming Twilight Zone, the movie was an anthology, and it was a bunch of different directors directing a bunch of sequences, and John Landis directed one of them. And in it, there's this Vietnam sequence. And in the filming of it, a helicopter crashed, and killed everybody that was on the helicopter. Or sorry, no, it didn't. It didn't kill. It killed 3 people on the ground, and it injured everybody that was on the helicopter. And one of the reasons why it happened was basically that like John Landis was not being a responsible director. I think he was never found like criminally liable or anything like that. But it's one of those things where he's never really owned up to his part of it, but I don't think he can, because legally if he did, then people would come after him. So I understand that, but also it's not cool. It's not good. So John Landis, he's a controversial figure, but was a very skilled director in his day. His son Max Landis is a piece of trash. I'll just go ahead and say that on the internet. I don't have any problem with that. He's done some things that are of note, but I will not support anything that's got anything to do with Max Landis, because he's a bad person. And you can go ahead and Google that if you like. I won't get into that. But so there's a little. I always have mixed feelings when I'm watching this movie, because it is tied in with that sort of thing. You know, if you listen to ThunderQuack for any period of time, you know, Amanda and I would go back and forth, you know, separate art from the artist and all that sort of thing. And I think it's possible. I think it's just difficult sometimes harder than others. Like, very difficult to watch a Harry Potter film, which would be on the list for Perfect 10 Halloween films, if not for the fact that J.K. Rowling is also a trash person. Let's get in to another email. Let's jump into this email from Amanda Ricky. Amanda Ricky writes in, "Hi, Mike and Amanda." Amanda's not on this podcast. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Amanda Ricky, but Amanda Conkin is not here. Eventually, I'm sure she will be on Perfect 10 at some point to talk about something, but she's not here on the regular, because she just quit podcasting on me, in case you didn't know. And then I ended up starting this podcast, and now I'm doing what is possibly my favorite podcast that I've ever done. So it all worked out, but it doesn't change the fact that she did cruelly abandon me back to solo podcasting, but that's fine. No, I just get to talk to all sorts of cool people now, and Amanda doesn't have to be burdened with listening to me yammer on for hours. Amanda Ricky, though, you wrote in, here's your top 10 Halloween movies / episodes. I like how you did this. Tower of Terror, Casper, Rocky Horror Picture Show, fantastic, an absolute perfect 10. The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, also a perfect 10. Here's the this list. This is a very good list, because like Tower of Terror, I'm not super familiar with. Casper, I don't know if I'd call it a perfect 10, but it is a fun movie. Rocky Horror Picture Show, perfect 10. Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, perfect 10 holiday special. Beetlejuice, absolutely perfect 10. Beetlejuice, my favorite Tim Burton film, bar none. Like light years ahead of everything else. I think that was when he was at the top of his game. You wrote Ghostbusters, but I think you just meant Ghostbusters, which we've already established on the podcast is a perfect 10. Halloween, we're talking the original here, unlike Tyler saying that the third Halloween is his perfect 10 Halloween movie. This is the original one. Double Double, Toil and Trouble. If I'm not mistaken, are you referring to the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen film, Double Double, Toil and Trouble? Is that, because I think that's what that is. I'm gonna look this up. Double Double, Toil and Trouble. Yeah, it's a TV movie, and that's absolutely Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. On Halloween night, 2 precocious little girls try to save their parents from their nasty old capitalist aunt's greedy clutches. Magic abounds, and they meet mysterious new friends along the way. I have absolutely watched this movie more than once, because back in the day, Full House was the best. It remains one of the best shows ever, and so, you know, obviously, like you, Amanda, I am of the perfect age for this was 1993, right dead center in the zone for me to be all about the Olsen twins and anything that they do. So I have seen this. I have seen this movie a few times, and I can attest, it's a good Halloween movie. There's not that many like Halloween specific movies. This is the thing, but it deserves to be on this list. As I said, great list. Halloween episode of Boy Meets World. Which one are we talking about here? Are we talking about the Scream style Halloween episode? Because that it is a great episode. And then Scream itself is on here as well. Yeah, that Halloween episode of Boy Meets World, which let's bring that up because there are a couple of Halloween episodes of Boy Meets World, because there's the one, speaking of Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, there's the one that has Candace Cameron in it, where she's a witch who tries to steal Jack's soul or eat him or something. I don't remember, but I should remember. I've watched it like a million times. But there's also the Halloween episode where they are in the let's see. I think it's, man, it's got to be, maybe it's season 6. It's either season 6 or season 5. I think season 6 might be the witch one. Let's see. No, that's not it. Where is it? Anyways, I'm going to stop looking this up because I thought it would be easier to find than that. But there's a great episode where like everybody is like being murdered in the midst of the episode, and then by the end of it you find out that everything's fine. So I think that's the one that you're talking about, and it's a great episode of Boy Meets World. But here's the thing about Boy Meets World. They're all great episodes. That's not entirely true, but a lot of them are great episodes. It's a fantastic show. That's great. Thank you, Amanda, Ricky, for that one. And let's go to our last email. This is our last email. This one comes from Steve Stebbing, who I at some point, I'm thinking I'm gonna get Steve to do our January episode. I'm gonna talk to him about that and get him scheduled for January to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, because Steve has great taste in film, and it'll be a really good conversation. So Steve says, "Hey, when the gauntlet is thrown down, I accept." I called him out. I called him and Tyler out and said, like, "Come on, guys, you're my horror guys. Like, give me some good Halloween movies." So he gave me a list of 5, but his list of 5 has each one has like a little blurb to go with it. So let's start at the top of his list here. Return of the Living Dead, punk rock zombies in a graveyard, Gulliger, Tom Matthews having the worst luck imaginable, and a tar man that goes brains. Classic. Yeah, I mean, like Return of the Living Dead. It's like this, like Night of the Living Dead being like the first zombie movie, right? And Return of the Living Dead, I think, is the first sequel to it. Event Horizon, a ship passes through a black hole and unleashes unspeakable horrors on a crew and becomes the greatest accomplishment of Paul W.S. Anderson's career. Just a gargantuan of a movie. Yeah, Event Horizon. I went to see Event Horizon because it was starring Sam Neill, who I thought was like a movie star because of Jurassic Park. And it wasn't until I was much older, and even really not really until this moment when I'm sort of just thinking about this fact, but actually Sam Neill, horror film star, The Omen, and Mouth of Madness, Event Horizon. Sam Neill's been in a lot of horror movies. Anyways, Yeah, so I went to see it for that. I think Sam Neill, Lawrence Fishburne's in it as well, and was very confused and very frightened because I was young. I think I would have been like 14 or 15 maybe when Event Horizon came out, but blown away by this movie as well. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand any of what was happening. Basically, they go through this black hole and end up in hell, sort of thing. Anyways, Hereditary. Ari Aster shows that grief is a catalyst for unspeakable horrors in a film that is so unsettling that you will be in the fetal position by the end. Also, Toni Collette was robbed during award season. Yeah, you know what? I've never watched Hereditary because I don't think I can handle it. I think it's too much for me. But I have heard many a good thing. And Toni Collette is an amazing actress. So I don't doubt that fact. Possession, one of the most idiosyncratic horror films you will ever see, and it will leave a stain on your soul. How they invoked these performances from Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill, I will never know, but they make every moment unforgettable. There's Sam Neill coming up again. Suspiria. I'm going for the remake on this one because it was said that it was impossible to recreate the atmosphere that Argento did. Luca Guadagnino, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, makes it his own with disturbing moments that are hard to shake and a haunting score from Radiohead's Tom York. Yeah, Suspiria is one of those ones that's on my list that I'd like to get to, but I haven't yet. Horror movies are tough because like especially when they're like more recent stuff, but when I say recent, I mean within the last 10 years. Because with kids, it's like the opportunity to watch horror movies is few and far between because you don't necessarily want to watch it when there's a possibility of one of them walking in on it, being traumatized for life. It's getting late. There's a big yawn for you guys. Yeah. Awesome list, Steve. There's here's the thing, like these are some legit scary movies. So other lists have got some fun stuff on it, and I would say Return of the Living Dead also falls in that category because I think by today's standard, those older zombie movies are a little bit hokey, but yeah, I mean these other ones, legit scary movies. So just be warned with that list that I bring a buddy. Watch them during the day with the lights on. I will give one honorable mention to what has become a bit of a tradition in this house, which is after we go trick-or-treating, we watch Ghostbusters. So that'll be happening next Monday, but I don't think we'll make it all the way through Ghostbusters. It depends. It'll depend on the weather's possibly not going to be very nice. Vancouver, that's pretty par for the course. But depending on how much trick-or-treating we do, how early we get started. Cassie will be coming out this year, so probably early, probably start around 6 o'clock. And I don't imagine that they'll want to go for longer than an hour. So if we're home by 7, and we'll probably watch Ghostbusters. We'll put it on and we'll see how far we get, which is what we did last year. So that's a little bit of a tradition in this house. But it's all like, this is the thing about Ghostbusters. I don't put it on a Halloween list because it's always a good time to watch Ghostbusters. I will say that Ghostbusters 2 is at the top of my list for New Year's movies. When Harry Met Sally is at the top of Crystal's. And you know what? I'm going to try. Don't tell her. Nobody tell her. But I'm going to try and get Crystal to do an episode of Perfect 10 around the new year to talk about When Harry Met Sally, because it's one of her favorite movies. So it'll be an excuse. What I'll do is I'll say, like, we'll watch it. Because the thing is that we used to watch it every year, and it got to be a bit much. Because she would also just want to watch it randomly during the year. It was like, I can handle When Harry Met Sally once a year, once every 2 or 3 years, but I don't need to watch it every year. But it actually has been a little while since we watched it, so so maybe I'll coax her to come on the podcast and talk about that one. But Ghostbusters 2 is my favorite New Year's movie. But That's not what this list is about. This is about Halloween movies. And I told you guys that I would give you one more honorable mention before I closed it out. And that is, it's an honorable mention because I don't watch it. I won't watch this movie during Halloween season, which I think is when other people start watching it. But I don't actually think it's a Halloween movie because the story begins on November 1st. And that movie is A Nightmare Before Christmas. A Nightmare Before Christmas, here's the thing. It's a Christmas movie, guys. It's not a Halloween movie. It's not about Halloween. Halloween plays a role in it, but only in so much as like we need to understand what Halloween is to understand Halloween Town. But it is a movie about Christmas. It's a movie about the meaning of Christmas, the spirit of Christmas, and amongst other things. I mean, it's a movie about cultural appropriation, right? But I don't think that was the intent, but that's what it's kind of become. But it's also just a great film. And November 1st is the earliest, in my opinion, that you can watch A Nightmare Before Christmas, and you have until December 25th. But even then, it's like, I really think that like there's not a lot of movies that are November movies. A Nightmare Before Christmas is a November movie. And then when we get into December, then I want to watch, I mean, this one's another difficult one because Tim Allen has become quite the character in the last few years. But the Santa Claus films, right? Or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeers, all of that sort of stuff. The holiday smash hit Jingle All the Way, to name a few. But I'm going to stop there because in December, we're absolutely going to come back and talk about everybody's perfect 10 Christmas movies. So look forward to that. I am actually recording tomorrow afternoon, but you'll get it next week. Or actually, I guess as you're listening to it this afternoon, I might be recording it right now, but we've got David, who is a new friend from Twitter, coming onto the podcast. He's been on What the Force, which is how I became aware of him. I'm just going to steal tons of guests from What the Force. Marie Claire has great taste in film, television, all of that, but also human beings. So eventually I'll get basically everybody who's ever guested on What the Force on one of my podcasts. But David's coming on to talk about Kingdom Hearts. I'm really excited about this conversation because I love Kingdom Hearts as much as it is a tangled mess of nonsense. It is also one of my favorite video game franchises. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that. That'll be out next week for you guys, Tuesday for Patreon supporters, and then next Friday for everybody else. So look forward to that. And then we'll have another off the record. We've got Force Perspectives. If you haven't listened to that, that's my current Star Wars podcast, where I talk to my friends about what they love about Star Wars, why they are Star Wars fans. And here, I'll go ahead and I'll announce the guest for the next episode of Force Perspectives to get you to jump over and listen to that podcast. If you are a Quiver fan, you'll know this name well. We've got Andy Babacht coming on to talk about Star Wars. It's going to be very interesting because I have not ever talked to him about we've had a conversation here and there about Star Wars, but I've never really talked to him about what he likes about Star Wars. So I'm looking forward to that conversation that you guys should have sometime in the next week. Look forward to that. Obviously, support us over on Patreon, patreon.com/ThunderQuack, if you are so inclined to get early episodes and all that sort of thing. But thank you to everybody who wrote in for this episode. If you guys want to get a jump on it with the next one, go ahead and send me an email, thunderquacknetwork@gmail.com, or DM me on Twitter, either on my Twitter @Arkwolf, ARKWULF, or on the ThunderQuack Twitter @ThunderQuackPod, or or you can send a message through Patreon if you're a Patreon supporter. There are other ways. The Discord is also a really great way to drop me a note for something like the Perfect 10 Christmas special that we'll be doing. But that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you to our Patreon producer, Brian Mirowski. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. And I'll close this one out. It's the Halloween episode. Real simple. Have a great, fun, and safe Halloween, everybody. And we'll see you in November to talk about Kingdom Hearts. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohn. Follow us on Twitter at ThunderQuackPod, on Instagram at ThunderQuackPodcast, on Facebook at ThunderQuack, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the podcast by heading to patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access, bonus episodes, and the ThunderQuack Perfect 10 Pop Quiz. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.